Hello, everyone, and welcome back to WoundCasters by WoundCare Today, where we explore the gaps by exploring the truth. I'm your host, Felix Boecker, and today I'm excited to be here with another incredible guest. But before we begin, don't forget that you can reach out to us through our website at WCT-US.com, where you can also find tons and tons of educational material, all related to the world of chronic wound care. My guest today is Daniel Andrews, who is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Reapplix. Daniel, so much we have to talk about with this 3C patch that you guys are doing. But first of all, welcome to WoundCasters. I'm so glad we get to do this. I'm so happy you're here. Welcome.
Felix, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And first off, I want to just say thank you for all that you're doing to progress the knowledge of wound care in this industry. I love the approach and innovation. So thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you. We really try to do exactly that, reapproach education in a digital-first, online-only platform here at Wound Care Today. And I think this podcast just adds the little cherry on top. So let's talk a little bit about who you are and what you do. You are the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Reapplix, which creates the 3C patch. So what does Reapplix do? How did you get involved? Tell us a little bit more about your story.
Sure. Well, very briefly, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. So I am a 21-year veteran in advanced wound care. So I started as a sales representative many years ago for a company that led the way with enzymatic debriding agents, as well as cellular tissue-based products and various antimicrobial types of technologies. And eventually made my way into sales leadership, and we were acquired by a very large global medical device company, and very, very well known throughout the industry, and took on a different range of roles in marketing, strategic accounts, and eventually came to the realization that I wanted to start my own company, to really lead a sales and commercial organization. And so I looked in many different market segments in the world of medicine and medical device, and Reapplix came along, and it really just hit all the marks in regards to the types of technologies that we would represent, as well as prioritize and building a great culture. So I've been here now for 4 years as the leader of the U.S. commercial organization, and it's been quite the ride.
That's amazing. 4 years with the same company. That's also almost unheard of in today's day and age. People tend to switch jobs like they switch the underwear sometimes, or at least I hope that people switch the underwear regularly. So, yeah, let's talk about Reapplix. So, what do you guys do?
Sure. So Reapplix is a Danish-based organization, and it really centers around one technology, and that's 3C patch. And the founders of this organization actually invented the technology. In fact, the gentleman that invented 3C patch invented the very first patient-administered insulin pen. So that was his first claim to fame. And what these founders realized is one of the fundamental challenges we have with patients that suffer from lower extremity chronic wounds is poor vascular supply. Oftentimes complicated by the diabetes itself, which is of course a systemic disease, and when you think about, okay, well, when we don't have the proper blood supply, particularly at the microvascular level, what then leads to this chronic wound environment, just being stuck in this chronic inflammatory state. And it really comes down to being able to deliver some of the key healing biomolecules and cell types, and particularly cytokines, growth factors, various different cell types that can then modulate and adapt based off of the micro wound environment to get that wound headed in the right direction. And so these founders realized, geez, if we could extract some of the most potent molecules and signaling cytokines and cell types and compact them into a physical structure that makes it 100% autologous and deliver this technology to the wound week after week, could it make a difference? And sure enough, they found, and of course, starting with bench data, then it moving into animal, then moving into human, that the results were undeniable. And so 3C Patch was founded, developed, and eventually the studies were done and then brought to the United States for commercialization.
Yeah. What a story. So how long ago did all of this trajectory start? Like how long has Reapplix been around? How long has the 3C patch been around?
It's been a long journey, but the founders, they did so much right in bringing this incredible technology to market to ensure its success. It started in 2008, quite a long time ago. Again, starting with just the early stages of product development, and then they eventually moved into the scientific aggregation of the data over time. But one of the big monumental milestones that was achieved was the 3C patch being evaluated by a group of investigators in Europe that eventually brought a randomized controlled trial on the use of 3C patch to publication. And so that happened in 2018, that the 3C patch was evaluated in a investigator-led, randomized controlled, prospective, double-blinded study in Europe, and that was published in 2018 in the Lancet Journal of Diabetes and Endocrinology, which was a huge win for the technology. I mean, as you probably know, the Lancet is one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world, and so when you dive into the randomized controlled trial, which we can get into in a minute if you like, but it was really that randomized controlled trial that then paved the way for positive CMS coverage, which happened at the end of 2021.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about this trial, because in our pre-show interview, you talked about this trial and you shared some data with me from it. So I think it's worthwhile to talk about it, because this was a monumental study that really changed everything for your company. So tell us a little bit more about the study, what it showed, and how it made all the difference.
Sure. I haven't seen a study that had such rigorous inclusion-exclusion criteria to make it so real world ever in wound care, which makes it incredibly powerful. So let's talk a little bit about that. We're certainly proud that the investigators put this much work into making it applicable to the everyday provider. So what these investigators did is, again, it was investigator led, and so it was multi-centered. And what they did is they randomized patients, and they included patients with wounds all the way to Wagner grade 3, so with exposed bone and tendon. They also included patients with ABIs all the way down to 0.5. And what made this study so real world was that they did a 4-week run-in period. So the screening period was for 4 weeks. And if patients achieved 50% healing or greater during that 4-week screening period, they were excluded from the study. So these were really those challenging or hard to heal wounds. I think all of us could argue that every wound is hard to heal in the chronic wound care space, but these truly were, right. These were patients that didn't hit that critical healing benchmark of 50% in 4 weeks, and so those patients were included in the study. And so they had a massive patient population that enrolled, well over 500 patients. But after that screening period, it ended up being 269 patients were randomized, and so the arms of the study was, really sound standard of care versus sound standard of care with 3C patch for diabetic foot ulcers. Okay, and the results speak for themselves. It was all statistically significant. After the 20-week study, they found that 3C patch led to an 89% higher likelihood to heal versus standard of care alone. So really strong results. And it was really that randomized controlled trial that was presented to CMS that ultimately overturned a longstanding national coverage determination for blood-based therapies that did not provide access, overturning that and creating a whole new regenerative wound care category that is now reimbursable in the United States for patients that suffer from diabetic chronic wounds.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the sticking points in our discussion too. That there was an NCD initially that
Mhm.
prevented you guys from coming here on market, and this study really made the difference for CMS. So it's a pretty rigorous study. I really like that. Heavy standard of care. You know, the big thing that I see with diabetic foot ulcers is wound care providers get so hung up on the treatment, right? The dressing that they're going to choose, the tissue product they're going to choose, the advanced wound care dressing that they're going to choose, without dealing with glycemic control, offloading, vascular studies, vascular revascularization, right? If the patient has poor inflow to begin with. And all those things have to be taken into account as well. So the fact that all of that was done, and then on top of that, 3C patch made all the difference, not just for your patients, but also for CMS and ultimately your company. I mean, that's a triple whammy. That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. So
Have
I
you
yeah,
have you ever heard of the International Working Group for Diabetic Foot?
yes, I have heard of them.
Okay, I hadn't until I joined this organization, but the International Working Group for Diabetic Foot is this prestigious group of KOLs across the globe, including U.S. Key opinion leaders that are some of the most published in our space, very recognizable names. And in essence, this group gets together every 3 years, and they look at the evidence that's out there for the treatment of patients suffering from diabetic foot, right? And diabetic foot ulcers. Um, and and they put all the evidence through a gauntlet of reviews, a very rigorous process, and ultimately they land on a guideline for providers to lean on for patients, the most evidence based approach to treating patients with diabetic foot ulcers. And the International Working Group for Diabetic Foot, after reviewing the randomized controlled trial that was done on 3C patch, have put 3C patch in the recommended category. And so when patients fail to achieve standard of care, and this is why I bring this up when you mentioned, the importance of doing sound standard of care, and then being assertive to move beyond standard of care when we don't hit those benchmarks. The International Working Group for Diabetic Foot recommends the use of a leukocyte platelet fibrin patch when standard of care has failed for patients that suffer from diabetic foot ulcers. There's only one leukocyte platelet fibrin patch on the planet. That's the patch. Now, they in turn do not recommend other blood-based therapies because of the weak level of evidence, PRP being the most well-recognized generic name. So we're quite proud of that. I did want to just mention that because I think that group there needs to be greater awareness of the great work that they do.
Yeah.
And it ties into your comment around, quickly parlaying off sound standard of care. And then what is good sound standard of care for diabetic foot care? And you can find it in the International Working Group for Diabetic Foot Guidelines.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is absolutely something to be proud of, and you should absolutely toot your own horn here with this kind of background and this kind of support, and the evidence is obviously speaks for itself. So let's talk about 3C patch. How does it work? How is it utilized? You said it's autologous. It's a leukocyte fibrin patch. So, logistically, if somebody wants to use 3C patch in their clinic, what exactly does that look like?
Sure, absolutely. So I had a great plastic surgeon mentor when I first got into wound care, and he taught me in the early days of my career that it's tough to beat autologous. There's no better healing engineer than our own self. But oftentimes, these types of surgeries and interventions can be quite risky, right? Especially for these patients with high comorbidities. And so, the world of regenerative wound care has really leaned on, these cellular tissue based products as like the lead innovation for helping to address these deficits once standard of care has failed to help regenerate new tissue. And the fundamental problem we have with those technologies, and they're amazing technologies, is that they oftentimes get sterilized and rinsed and radiated and processed in a way that we lose a lot of the healing potential of those grafts. But when you think about autologous, there is no better way. And so what is 3C Patch? 3C Patch is a fully autologous 3-layer patch that's a physical structure. And it's made nothing other than from the patient's own blood. And so what is it comprised of? So first off, the fibrin matrix that is really the prime substrate for the technology is a reservoir for over millions and millions. Billions of platelets, which provide those growth factors, and it also acts as a reservoir for cytokines and such. And then it also contains millions of leukocytes. And so it's 3 distinct layers, all held within this fibrin matrix that acts as this reservoir. And so after just a few minutes of the centrifuge doing its role in creating the 3-layer patch, and we can get into that in just a minute, you have this physical structure that can be cut, fenestrated, stretched, but an actual structure that you can place where you want the patch to go, very easily manipulated and user friendly right there bedside. And what's really important to understand is it's unidirectional, so it releases those leukocytes first. So the layer that goes down first into the wound is the leukocyte layer. And so what do leukocytes do for wound care? Well, we know leukocytes play a critical role in addressing any bacterial load or potentially helping prevent biofilm formation. It also helps regulate the inflammatory state. And so what's really interesting about the technology is these cell types can begin to pick up on various signals in the wound and determine whether that wound is ready to quickly progress into the proliferative state or whether it needs to move into more of a pro-inflammatory state. And it's those leukocytes that really help steer the way and, our tip of the spear, if you will, for picking up on that. So the leukocytes help address the bioload and or provide the proper signaling for the next stage of wound healing. And then, of course, the platelets. You're going to have just a gluttony of growth factors and cytokines that are in very, very high concentration. And then lastly, of course, as we mentioned, the fibrin matrix, again, it's that reservoir, but what it does provide versus other technologies that may be out there is it allows for a much higher concentration of those biohealing molecules, which we just discussed in living cells, but it allows for more of a sustained release over time. So it's going to be able to deliver those actives over the week period of treatment at a sustained rate versus other therapies that may be out there derived from the blood.
Yeah. So just to make sure that I get this right, based on our previous discussion, so you draw blood from the patient through a peripheral vein, and then you run this through your proprietary centrifuge, which then creates out of the blood, without maybe there's substrate that's added, but out of that blood, it generates this patch that gets then applied to the wound bed. And like you said, you can fenestrate it to allow exudate to pass through. You can trim it, you can size it to the wound. But from what I remember too, it's a certain size, like 2 by 2 centimeters or something like that. So tell us a little bit about that and what size wounds can be treated with this patch.
Sure, we'll start with that, but I want to rewind because I want to make sure the process is super clear.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so yeah, let's start with the process because that's I think a great transition. So as you mentioned, it does require blood draw, and then once you do the 18 milliliter blood draw, you then take the device and you put it into our proprietary patented centrifuge. And this is one of the most greatest benefits we hear from our clinics is the only work that it requires from the nurse is the blood draw and then a push of a button. That's it. So
That
within
seems
minutes,
complex.
well, that is absolutely really, really important because I mean, with the nursing shortage out there and just what's required of our nursing team. I mean, they're the heart of many of our wound care
Oh,
clinics,
no doubt. No doubt.
but absolutely, but they are so task saturated and they have all these various tasks that they need to do. And so when you look at some of the other technologies out there, they require the nurse to stop what they're doing and mix and concoct and modulate. And that will not work in the average day clinic. It just won't.
Yeah.
And we see that every day. And whereas with 3C patch, it works in complete parallel to the nursing team's workflow. All it requires, as I mentioned, is a push of a button. And then 3C patch is being generated and created within the centrifuge. And in parallel, the nurse team is going to continue doing what they normally do with patient intake. And by the time they're done doing their normal routine, the patch is ready. They grab the provider. The provider comes in, assesses the wound, debrides as necessary, and then applies the patch with the leukocyte layer down first. And then just cover with a primary dressing of choice. Our kits come with a primary dressing already included, and then they would choose a secondary dressing based off of the exudate level. And then they're going to have that patient come back every week as they typically do. They'll assess the wound and apply another patch.
Okay.
Now, as far as our business model and how we bring the technology to our clinics, we keep it very simple. We want to try to improve patient access for this incredible technology as easy as possible. And so we do provide the centrifuges with just a minimal commitment on the disposables, which is the kits themselves. So the clinic will purchase the kits. We place the centrifuge and maintain that centrifuge. And of course, provide a first-in-class support system to ensure that the providers, the team, and the patient have an ideal positive experience with 3C patch.
Yeah. So how big is the patch? Because that's all. It's also standardized, right? It's always the same size. So how big is this patch?
Good. I'm glad you reminded me of that question. So the 3C patch is 5 square centimeters. What's really important to understand is, and we have to kind of forget what we were taught when we think about cellular tissue-based products, we need to apply them edge to edge, and that's really because of their mode of action. What's different about the 3C patch technology is that patch really is just the vehicle for delivering all those key healing molecules, cytokines, and cells, right? And so that patch goes into the wound. You're going to place the patch leukocyte layer down in the more complex area of the wound. So let's say you have exposed tendon or bone, you're going to put it there. Where you have depth, you're going to want to put it there. And then what happens then is those cell types begin to diffuse and begin to migrate beyond the patch border. And so the next question is, well, how big of a wound can it treat? Well, the answer is, we know based off of real world evidence, it can treat patients with significantly larger wounds than 5 square centimeters. And that's been shown in evidence over and over and over again. So at the end of the day, that 5 square centimeter patch can treat the vast majority of the patients that come through the door in your average day wound clinic or physician office. But in the case that it is a exuberantly large wound, you can use multiple patches if you need to.
Oh, good. That was actually my next question. Like, what do you do for these super large wounds where you may want to use more than one patch? So that's good to know that you can use more than one. But it definitely makes sense based on the mode of action to put it onto the most critical aspects of the wound that there are the deepest, the most exposed subcutaneous structures. So that makes perfect sense. What does 3C stand for? Does it stand for anything, or is it just a name that was chosen?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's that's funny. We like to, after our in-services, quiz the audience to make sure they've got this part down. But the 3Cs stand for the 3 distinct steps in the process for creating 3C patch. So the very first step is centrifugation. Okay. And then what happens is the 3C patch then allows coagulation to take place, the second C. And then once coagulation is complete, the centrifuge does this all automatically on its own. It knows and can sense when coagulation is complete. And then the last step in the C process is compaction. And what that means is in the device, the vac container, if you will, that collects the blood, there's a filter mechanism that then collects all those leukocytes and growth factors and cytokines and fibrin and compacts all of that towards the top, which then gives you that physical structure. So there is no additive at the that leads to the creation of the patch. There's not some foreign collagen substrate. It's the patient's own fibrin that's found in their blood that through the natural coagulation process creates this just beautiful structure that then again houses all these key healing molecules, cytokines, and cell types.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely mind blowing to me that you take the patient's own blood, you spin it down, and you create this patch. And like you said, autologous is best. I mean, this is something where the patient should have no allergic reaction, no negative reaction to it. It's their own blood, it's their own tissue, it's their own cells, which makes this truly a remarkable tool in the wound healing arsenal. Now, one of the questions I had from a logistical standpoint, you mentioned putting the leukocyte heavy side down first. So how do you figure that out when you have that patch, when you get it out of the centrifuge? How do you know which side to put down onto the wound bed? And the reason I ask is I have seen this time and time again with other dressings where the dressings get placed upside down, and they simply don't work quite that well. With a 3C patch, I can sort of see how potentially doing it upside down isn't the end of the world. But at the same time, if there is a right side to put it on, how do you figure that out?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you absolutely do want to put the leukocyte layer down first. And it's quite obvious. So the top of the patch is very smooth. And so when you take your forceps to extract the 3C patch from the device itself, once the process is complete, the leukocyte layer is facing down to the filter. And because of that, it has a very distinct checker pattern on that layer that's super obvious. And so I had a provider refer to it as it looks like a Belgian waffle. And so the leukocyte layer looks like a Belgian waffle. And so now we've coined the phrase waffle to wound. So just to keep it really
Waffle to
simple,
wound. I
yeah,
love
just
it.
put the waffle to wound. So that's the leukocyte layer.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Now, you had
Yeah.
mentioned DFUs to use this on diabetic foot ulcers. Are there any other type of wounds that you're approved for that this can be used on? Or is that in the works? Is that in the future? What's the status there?
Absolutely. So first off, the FDA indications are for any draining cutaneous wounds, contraindicated for grossly infected wounds and/or malignant wounds, of course. But so those are the FDA approved, or cleared indications. And now, as we know, insurance coverage dictates a lot of what we can provide our patients access to, unfortunately, here in the United States in the outpatient space. And so when you look at the national coverage determination that CMS has written, they have provided clear indications of what wounds they will cover the technology for. And as it stands today, any patient that has diabetes with a chronic wound, regardless of location, so head to toe, they would then have access to 3C patch. So as long as it's diabetic patient with a chronic wound, they could have access to 3C patch, not just for diabetic foot ulcers. So I hope that addresses your question. Have we had providers use the technology per the FDA cleared indications and had tremendous outcomes? Absolutely. But today it's going to be covered for your Medicare beneficiaries for diabetic chronic wounds.
This may be a question I don't know if you're allowed to answer, but I do want to ask: is there anything in the works to get this approved for other indications as well? And the reason I'm asking is, the venous leg ulcers, for example, seem like a good target for this. They often respond well to tissue based products, and if you have something that is the patient's own blood, the patient's own tissues, the patient's own cells, that autologous stuff, that would seem beneficial. Although with venous leg ulcers, you oftentimes have more than one wound as well. So it's not just one wound. So there's the complexity added. Well, what do you do with 3, 4, 5 leg ulcers? Like for venous leg ulcers, I can see this. But there's also a need for, the big thing for me is, other chronic type wounds that have just not responded to standard of care. Those are ones that I struggle with because a lot of times tissue-based products are not approvable for those because they're not diabetic foot ulcers, they're not venous leg ulcers, they're just chronic type wounds that have just not responded to anything we've thrown at them. So, are there any other indications coming for a 3C patch other than the diabetic wounds?
Yeah, the answer is absolutely. We're just getting started with commercial deployment of 3C patch across the United States. But there is an evidence generation play in motion. It's really going to take a coalition of manufacturers to generate the data to really, undisputedly provide the evidence that's required for coverage beyond diabetic patients. We fortunately have been able to work closely with some of the other manufacturers and quite pleased with just the like-mindedness and some of the early evidence generation that is definitely very, very promising. So more to come there, but absolutely, there's a massive population that needs our help.
Yeah, absolutely. So, interestingly enough, my very first job, well, actually my second job, but my first sort of real job that I got on my own was working as a component tech in a blood bank. And one of the things that I noticed as I was spinning down all these whole blood products into plasma and platelets was that some people have a significant amount of triglycerides, and their plasma just becomes really cloudy and white, almost like milk.
Yeah,
So when you
yeah.
draw somebody's blood and it's that really milky white plasma in the blood, is that a contraindication to using 3C patch, or have you noticed any adverse effects with, or that it just doesn't work as well when you have somebody with a high lipid profile?
Not at all. So we do have sensors in the centrifuge that can pick up on what that is called is opaque plasma. It can pick up on that cloudy, high triglyceride plasma layer, and it adapts and it picks up on it, and it just knows when and how to sense when coagulation is complete. But it doesn't have any impact on the effectiveness. There's no data out there to suggest that has any impact whatsoever. But what we have noticed as a trend is those patches tend to be thicker, which doesn't necessarily impact again the outcomes. In fact, in the randomized controlled trial, it was noted that based off of patient biology, that certain patches looked differently. Some were thick, some were thin, some were different in color than others, but there was no net impact on the actual effectiveness of the appearance of the patch because every patch is different. My patch is going to look different than yours, Felix, and that's just based off of our biology and what we may have eaten that day,
Right.
medications we're on. It can all play a role.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, all patches are effective based off of the data.
That's fantastic. All right. So anybody listening into this who wants to use 3C patch in their clinic on their patients, how can they reach out to you? How can they get this stuff into their clinic?
Sure. Well, first, just go to reapplix.com. There should be an interested customer form there. There is one. But they can always reach out to me as well. I gladly take any inquiries. My email is D as in Daniel, F as in Frank, A as in Andrews at reapplix.com. Feel free to email me at any point, dfa at reapplix.com, and I'll gladly put you in touch with a local representative or anyone within the organization based off your inquiries.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. And hopefully the powers that be will make sure your email address is in the show notes as well so that people can just point and click and link out to your website as well. So that's awesome. We've talked about so much when it comes to the 3C patch. It really sounds like incredible technology that does some real wonders in the world of wound healing for diabetic wounds. Is there anything we haven't touched upon yet? Anything that you would like the world to know?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, listen, we as an industry have done a decent job, but we have so much more to do. And when you look at the state of patients suffering from diabetic chronic wounds, in the early, late 2000s, there was, 2009, 2010, I should say, there was some promising signs that amputation rates were going down. But unfortunately, they've swung back up. And so we need to do more. And yes. I truly believe that autologous therapy is really that next greatest innovation in regenerative wound care. And so now's the time to really open your eyes, explore new interventions, and see the power of autologous wound healing with 3C patch. When you look at the key roadblocks, one, does it fit seamlessly into my clinic workflow? And the answer is absolutely. It's fully automated, as we talked about. So your nursing team is going to be able to operate just as they normally have. Two, coverage is strong, provided to you by a national coverage determination by CMS. And then the outcomes will speak for themselves. So it's just a matter of, giving your patients the opportunity, and know that it's supported by one of the strongest randomized controlled trials that's ever been done in wound care. And so you're practicing evidence-based therapy, and we're here for you. We can handle the entire country. We provide a full suite of services and support to make sure that your clinic has a very positive experience. And just reach out. We're looking forward to partnering with you.
Yes, that sounds amazing. Well, Daniel, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, which we sadly have to bring to an end for today. I want to thank you all for spending some time with us today, exploring this gap and exploring this truth. We obviously want to hear your thoughts, comments, and reactions to this conversation. So please reach out. If there are any particular topics you want to hear about or other guests you would like to see on the show, reach out and contact us. And if you're listening to this on a podcast app, be sure to subscribe and leave us a 5-star review so others can find this content more easily. And if you like this particular episode, please share it with a friend. Also, don't forget to check out our website at wct-us.com for lots more educational content. And finally, be sure to tune in next time as we explore yet another aspect of the challenging and rewarding field of chronic wound care. Ciao!